Hi, everyone. Catherine Matthijs-Sandell here, founder and CEO of Civility Partners. I have with me today a very dear friend, and she's a local legend here in San Diego among the training and development and leadership and coaching world. So I have Dr. Maureen Ori with me today. So thank you so much for being here with me, Dr. Mo, as we like to call her. So just a little bit about you. Your most recent book, I know you've written several, is called A Year of Resilience, and you published it last year. And I know you do a ton of leadership and coaching and training, or leadership coaching and training for Fortune 100 companies. And you're really focused on inclusive leadership and communication, and resilience is your big topic. Mine is civility, yours is resilience. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thanks so much, Catherine. It's fantastic to be here and spend a little time with you.
I know, I feel like we need to catch up. One day we'll have a glass of wine together. One day.
One day,
One
someday
day.
in the
One
future,
day.
whenever that might be.
Yeah, you're one of my idols. As you can see in Dr. Ori's background there, I was like, "Are you off camping somewhere? Are you in an RV?" She says, "No, I'm in my boat." So I just love how you consistently kind of set a bar for yourself and achieve it, and then go on to the next one. So you're definitely one of the most resilient people I know. So tell us first off, what is resilience? How do you define that?
Resilience, actually, when you ask people what it means, you get so many different definitions. You get anything from the ability to bounce back, the ability to sustain difficult challenges and come out positively on the other end. And certainly we have all had to bounce back from the many challenges within the last year or so, and kind of use some of that grit and tenacity to stick with it all. But I do like to say that it takes more than grit to stay afloat. Um, Resilience is not just grit and tenacity and kind of hanging in there in tough times. It's also really being able to kind of look around, pay attention to the weather, so to speak, and know when you need to shift or pivot so that you can continue to thrive amongst the challenges that come your way.
Okay, I like that. So being aware of your surroundings and probably self-aware in terms of your own emotions and what you're capable of handling, and shifting and pivoting and changing course if needed. Okay, I like
Yes.
that. I think that's a
Yeah.
good, because I've always heard bouncing back, but I think there's more to it than that. So how do you see resilience and civility tying together?
Great question. I'm glad you asked that. In fact, I think of some of the conversations you and I have had over the years about some of the challenges you faced in the workplace, which is well known in the work that you do. And resilience means being able to withstand some of those challenges, and as you did, know when to shift, know how to shift. And so looking at civility, for example, civility in the workplace, it's not always there, as you well know and as you talk about. But civility, respect, treating others well, building relationships, positive relationships, is a really huge component of resilience.
Mhm.
I've developed a resilience model which has 6 components. One of them being grit, yes. One of them, though, being the importance of connection and how people support each other throughout difficult times, and how you really shouldn't try and go it alone, because it doesn't serve us well if we try to just be stubbornly independent when it all hits the fan, so to speak.
Yeah, so you need people, and resilient people recognize that and don't try to do it on their own. And of course, I've done a lot of research on the cost and the damage to being treated with incivility, let alone bullying or being harassed. And that certainly is a tough scenario that can really take someone's self-esteem down. So we need civility at work if we're going to be resilient at work. We need civility at home if we're going to be resilient family members and help our family through times like this that we're all in.
Yeah.
Um, this is definitely an interesting time for you studying resilience, in that the whole world has to be more resilient than ever together. Every part of the world, of course, always has are things we need to be resilient about. We all have our different struggles, but this is pretty interesting that we're in this sort of social experiment right now to all be resilient around a similar scenario. We have a great question here. This is a good question. Someone's asking, what's the most powerful, resilience or stability? And I guess there's a part 2 to that question. That's a good one. What's the difference?
I don't know if I would, they're not on the same spectrum, right? They're essentially on different spectrums. So which is more powerful? I think perhaps it's more of the continuum. How do they connect? If you start, what do you start with? Civility to build resilience? Do you start with resilience to build civility? No, I think it's actually civility would come first. It's such an integral part of relationships, as you say, at work and at home. And in fact, and this is something I don't talk about a lot. I don't even think I've ever said this publicly. So this is the
big reveal.
big reveal, I guess. And people who have known me personally know this, but I was married for almost 2 decades to a narcissist, and it was a highly toxic relationship. In fact, I was thinking about it this morning on my walk that and I was a single mom, right? Perfect timing. I had 3 kids. Actually, I sometimes say I was a single mom long before I was a single mom because it was a toxic relationship. It was highly emotionally abusive for almost 2 decades. And I thought this morning, like, why did I stay? And I had, this belief of the underlying values of till death do you part. Well, we are no longer together and neither one of us died. So
Yeah.
I came to my senses, but I think part of my story of resilience grew from that experience. The lack of civility, and my coping strategy was to figure out how do you survive those challenging times.
Mm-hmm. I was just going to ask, how did you get inspired to study resilience and really become an expert? So it sounds like that's one scenario. I'm curious where else, what were some of the other things that compiled up into you being really interested in this topic?
Absolutely. That's a fantastic question. And oddly enough, way back when, during this crazy time of being in a toxic relationship and essentially being a single mother, even though I was married, I wanted to write about work-life balance. And I met with a publisher and she said, Maureen, don't write about work-life balance. Everyone's writing about work-life balance. Find something else. And I'm thinking, what is it? What's that something else? And then oddly enough, we had ducks at home in our backyard as pets. And one of them drowned. That's the short story. And I was thinking, I didn't know ducks could drown. Like even a duck can drown. And I'm thinking, what about balance and people and what can we learn from nature, right? About being more resilient. And so I actually, which is kind of why I got on there's a whole duck theme that goes with my model. But it's tied directly to what happens in nature and why did that duck not survive its experience in the pond, and why do some people not survive their experience in their own pond, or how can we stay afloat? What can we learn about being resilient? And so it was kind of the I guess the perfect storm of a bad marriage, a publisher telling me, no, don't talk about that, find something else. And then my poor little duck that just put it all together and started me on this journey. And that was about a decade ago.
Wow. And that duck is forever memorialized to your work because, you've got lots of little ducks everywhere. And we have a ton of really great questions. So I want you all to know I see your questions and I will ask Dr. Mo your questions. I just wanted to touch on something where you're talking about being in this toxic relationship. And thank you so much for sharing that. And that you were trying to figure out how to survive. And of course, in my workplace bullying work, we talk a lot about that word coping. And in fact, that's a lot of the research around sort of victims that come out of being bullied. They always use that word coping, which bugs me because coping feels like I'm just got my head down and I'm going to get through it versus survival or being resilient. I just feel like coping is not the right word. And I feel like that's what you were saying, that at first you were coping, head down, just trying to do it. And then these signs started kind of coming your way and you started realizing it was more about resilience and having to exit and making that decision to pivot, as you had said
Yeah.
earlier.
In fact, that's a great example because I agree. Coping doesn't cut it.
Mm-hmm.
We need to do more than cope. As you were sharing your perspective, I was thinking about a time I was working at a local university. The marriage had finally broken apart, and I found myself at my desk sitting alone, and it was lunchtime, and I thought, "Huh, I'd like to go to lunch with a friend or colleague." And I kind of looked up and looked around. Everyone had already left for lunch.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized at that moment that what I had been doing quite literally was putting my head down, isolating myself, kind of not going to lunch with anyone, not reaching out for support. And I was simply coping with the challenges. I didn't want to share my story. And
Mm-hmm.
when I realized, wow, I'd like to have lunch with someone, I hadn't built those relationships. They weren't available to me because I had locked myself out. And I think that was one of my important lessons of resilience. Coping, no, you're right. Coping is not enough. We need to somehow embrace the challenge, if you would,
Mm-hmm.
build those connections so that we can thrive in spite of the stuff we're going through.
Yeah, so I think it's the how you frame the challenge, right? That I'll just get my head down and get through it, or I'm going to see this as a challenge, and there's ways I can learn and grow from this. Maybe I won't know what they are until later. Sorry, I'm sure you can hear my 2-year-old
It's all
back there
good.
in the back. Be resilient while we're at home with the kids. So great
Exactly.
question. So Andrea's asking, how do we build resilience during times of racial violence? So that is a pretty serious scenario. So curious on your thoughts around resilience and racial violence.
Excellent question, Andrea. And it does make me think about the kind of the four pillars of content that I specialize in: leadership, diversity, resilience, inclusion. And with the racial violence, I think a lot of it has to start with our own perspectives. Like, where do we stand? Are we truly inclusive? Or do we have, everyone has bias. We'll start with
Mm-hmm.
that. It helps to know what those biases are, and sometimes it helps to put them in check and kind of whittle away the edges of that bias so that you can be more inclusive.
Mm-hmm.
When others are not inclusive and when there's the racial differences like our country has been struggling with, um, have a voice, right? Be able to speak up and perhaps challenge the thinking of a friend or colleague respectfully, right? With civility and respect, and have the open conversations. In fact, I
Mm-hmm.
remember. Yeah, this isn't necessarily race. It's a LGBT issue. One of my children is gay, and we were sitting at a bar one day, and the guy next to her started talking about the word gay and how he doesn't like the word gay, and he goes on and on and on, and she got really upset. And I said, and she's like, he's just some white guy that is not informed. And I said, how about instead of getting angry and having an argument, why not have a conversation, right? Because part of it is, if we're the one being offended, we also have to be able to say, where are you coming from, and how can we somehow meet in the middle or have a conversation with civility
Yeah.
instead of I'm just going to get pissed off and leave, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how can we build those bridges? Sometimes it's building one bridge at a time.
Yeah, I'm curious. Did your daughter actually speak up and say anything to him, or did you walk away from that scenario?
She said something to him, but it wasn't very polite.
Okay.
It was the postmortem afterwards when we were driving home. I'm like, okay, let's look at this. What's the learning moment here?
Gotcha.
And even and I'd say even old white guys or even people who are biased and uneducated perhaps or unaware of how they're coming across need to be um, need to be included. In fact,
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the concept of free speech, right? That it's very debatable. Oh, should this group of people be allowed to say this? Well, free speech is only valid if everyone can say something, whether we agree with them or not.
Right.
And if everyone's going to say something, sometimes we're going to disagree. And then how do we have that conversation to build those connections more effectively?
Yeah, yeah. So I think there's a lot there. We could do a whole 8-hour conversation around racial violence and civility and resilience. So thank you for some of those points. I'm seeing lots of other really great questions. So Serene is asking, how can an organization train their staff? How can an organization train their staff on resilience? What are some good sources to look at for a training session? Well, Dr. Ori does training on resilience, but curious about what are some of the tricks and tips that you offer in your training, or how do you help ensure that the people that you're training are walking away with some ability to change their behavior or thought process?
Absolutely. I think it's, first of all, finding a program that makes sense for you and your organization, whether it be how it's delivered or the content within the program. Um, the and create the opportunity, I think, perhaps starting with a survey of your employees to say, how are you feeling? Or is this something that would be helpful for you, instead of just throwing, I hate to say this, I've got a great program that we can work with you on. But before you just throw training at this as an issue, do a quick assessment to find out from your employees, how are they feeling? What are the resources they might need? Maybe they need access to mental health counselors. Maybe you need to build a community of resilience within your organization, and you do that through conversations and um, Zoom calls or whatever, right?
Mhm.
Maybe it's the tools of resilience, like how do we build better habits of resilience? How do we rebuild relationships that are broken? How do I need to pivot, and how can I pivot?
Mhm.
And how can I make that stick, right?
Mhm.
That whole even a duck can drown means ducks weren't hatched waterproof. It's something they've had to develop.
Yeah.
And so I've taken research on science and nature, lessons in resilience, and paired that with the psychological studies of resilience, and put that together. But I think when it comes to training, let's first make sure what your employees need, and then find a program that helps meet that need.
Yeah, I love that. Training 101 is that training doesn't fix problems. So there's a lot to be done right before the training needs assessments and all of that. And I know we both see that a lot of just, can you do some training and maybe that'll fix it? No, it doesn't work that way. So there's a lot of different ways to address resilience, it sounds like. And do you need to build a culture of resilience, or is it just giving them some tools? I like that. Let me see. How can a 55-year-old like me afford resilience? Resilience is something you build over time, little by little. I know that. I know that to be true. Any other thoughts, Dr. Ori?
Yes. Well, I'm older than 55, and I think you can't afford not to be resilient. I mean, because really, what are the options? Sink or swim, keeping my stay afloat model, right? Because you can swim, you can dog paddle, you can kind of tread water, you can cope, as we were talking about earlier. We can just survive for a while, but you can't tread water forever, right? You have to decide if you're going to kind of move forward and swim, or progress on your journey of resilience. And it takes one step at a time, whether it be someone trying to lose weight, they've got to start exercising, or they've got to change their habit. In fact, one of my favorite books, it's really about change management, but I reference it in my research, is it's called Change or Die. And it sounds like a horrible title, but I loved the title. It's by Alan Deutschman. He's the Fast Company author. And he talks about how three separate populations of prisoners, heart patients, and corporations, that if they don't change their behavior, they will die.
Mhm.
What's interesting is with heart patients, for example, given that diagnosis from their doctor, if you don't change your habits, lifestyle, what have you, you'll either be on the table or you're going to die. Only 10% of that population can sustain change. So you can't afford not to be resilient. And whether it be buying a book, listening to YouTube, podcasts, whatever, there's lots of free resources out there. It's just a matter of channeling your energy so you can start to swim.
Yeah. Why is that? What's the psychology behind that? That people are told you have to change or die, literally, and only 10% are able to sustain change. Why is that?
Because people try to do it on their own, right? Essentially, is if you're trying to change your lifestyle, your eating and your exercise, but you go back into the family and there's junk food in the house, and how are you going to resist that junk food? Or your family's a bunch of couch potatoes and they don't want to go exercise, so it reinforces the old lifestyle. Same with prisoners. The recidivism rate is very high because people go back to the neighborhood they grew up in, where
Mhm.
that toxic environment is. And so Alan talks about how you need to reframe your thinking, and you need to repeat that over and over and over again. And just like actually ducks apply oil to their feathers, every single feather, every single day you see an adult duck is sleek and shiny. It's because they have oil on their feathers. It's just like we need to apply our habits every single day. We need to shift our mindset, and perhaps shift our environment, and then we need to practice and continue that habit. And we can't do that alone. We need to get the support of others to help us be more resilient.
Yeah. That's something I've been talking about with my daughter a lot. She's going to be 7 on Friday, and she says a lot, I can't control my emotions. And she's a young girl, so she freaks out sometimes. Curious, I know child psychology isn't your expertise. Any tips for helping her figure out that she can control her emotions and the way she's thinking about something?
Yeah, I think to me it's all about reframing. So perhaps it's mindset, right? Working about mindset is
Mm-hmm.
you can look at it positively or negatively, and helping her learn to shift that mindset or reframe the situation
Yeah.
differently so
Yeah.
that she can take action more positively. And that takes practice. I mean, even with adults, we have a hard time reframing. Sometimes we get stuck in a rut and don't want to get ourselves out of it. But I think one of the insights I had recently during a morning meditation or a morning walk was that you have to work through the situation, right? You
Mhm.
can't go around it. You've got to work through it in order to get through on the other side really effectively.
Yeah.
And I think one of the questions that you could ask your child is, all right, how long are you going to be upset about this? Right?
Mhm.
Do you need an hour, a day? Do you need 2 days? Go ahead, go to your room, take the time. But how long are you going to be upset about this situation? And let's just decide upon it
Yeah.
and move on.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. Just give me a number and we'll work with that. We're getting a lot of comments around thank you, and loving this conversation. So thanks all for being here. Happy to throw out any other questions that come up. I was just thinking of something as you were talking, and I can't remember what it was now. Oh, going back to our originally, it sounds like support is so important because when you're talking about the recidivism rate, I actually did some coaching for a probation officer, and he was telling me, these people grow up on the streets. And just like in my household, you grow up and you go to college, and that's just it's not even said. It's just that's what happens. There's no conversation about it because that's what's going to happen. And just in that scenario, if you're growing up in a certain situation, that just being in a gang, that's just, you're probably going to engage in XYZ behavior, and it's unsaid because it's just, that's the culture. So we really have to be careful with who we surround ourselves with and who's giving us support, right? Because if they're giving us support that is feeding into those negative habits, then that's going to be an issue. So it's really important to think about who, in fact, one of my mentors had said, "You're the average of your five closest friends." And so then I often joke, I want to be the person bringing down the average. I want to be the lowest person in that
I
group,
love
so
that.
that I'm being lifted up by the other four people or the other five people in my average. So yeah, it sounds
I
like
love that.
super important, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. That whole concept of connection is really integral to resilience, and we get those positive relationships through being aware of how we show up, being civil and respectful and positive as opposed to toxic and negative.
Yeah, yeah. So then back to that question around racial violence, surrounding yourself, making sure that people in your average are people who are open to conversation and learning from each other and all of that. We have one other question. I think you said this earlier, but I'll throw it out. And then I have one more question and then I'll let you go. But what would you say are the three important pillars of resilience? Is a question coming through.
Excellent. Thank you. Actually, I think there are six, and I'm going to do a quick summary of my model,
Yeah.
and it all comes together with in the vision of a life preserver, if you would, red and white section, six all together. But thinking about that concept of connection, right? First, we need connection. We need relationships, positive relationships. And if I can align it with that duck analogy, just because I think it helps it stick, is
Yeah.
baby ducks aren't hatched waterproof. They're cute and fuzzy and soft, and mama ducks are sleek and shiny. And it's the mother duck that actually preens the baby ducks and prepares them to go into water. Otherwise, they might not survive their first swimming experience, right? So that connection is really integral, and we need to build those connections. The next thing we need to do is really be able to adapt or pivot. The pivot's the 2020 word, right? But we need to be able to adapt. And as ducks, what they do when they grow to maturity, they develop what's called a preening gland, a little sac of oil at the base of their tail. And I liken that adaptation as they grow and mature to how we need to change, whether we change our mindset, we reframe, like your daughter might need to do,
Mhm.
reframe our thinking. Maybe it's developing a new skill or new capacity so that we can bolster ourselves. But
Mhm.
that adaptation is not enough. Getting that duck, getting that little sack of oil is not enough. They need to then go to the next phase, which is application. They
Mhm.
need to apply the oil to their feathers every day, just like we need to practice our habits. You know, if you want to meditate every day, that means you need to find time in your life and do it every day. And if you miss a day, forgive yourself and get back on the horse the next day. But that application of the skills we're trying to develop or the capacity we're trying to develop is really important.
Mhm.
But then you think about, the duck swimming across the water that's cool, calm, and collected underneath. He's paddling his feet off. That represents the grit and tenacity. And Angela Duckworth talks about grit, right? And as I said, it takes more than grit to stay afloat, but we do need to have some of that stick-to-itiveness to continue to build those habits, to get through those difficult times.
Yeah.
But so that's number 4. There are 2 more concepts. The next one is really about balance.
Mhm.
Yes, we can have grit and tenacity, but we do need to take care of ourselves. And in my research, I found out that ducks that don't have access to clean water or have an unhealthy environment lose their capacity for waterproofing even as an adult duck. And and that's really important to us, that we need to take time to have a happy hour with a friend, or go for a walk, or
Yes.
meditate, or get enough sleep, or whatever we need to do to have a little bit of balance in life. And
Yeah.
then the last pillar is really about using again that duck analogy, is knowing when to fly south, paying attention to that weather. If you're in a toxic relationship or working in a toxic organization, it's pay attention to the weather. When it gets too cold up north, the ducks fly south to San Diego or go to Cabo and hang out there for the winter because it's
Yeah.
warmer there, right? But it's paying attention to our instinct, that voice in our head. I mean, think about it. How many times have you ignored the voice in your head and had horrible things happen, or just things don't go well when you don't listen to that voice in your head. So pay attention to your intuition and your instinct, and that will guide you on your journey of resilience.
I
So
have
that's
noticed
that.
that pattern. If I don't follow my gut, it always works out wrong. That yeah, following your gut is super important. So I'll just ask one last tip from you for leaders and managers and supervisors who are listening here. What is maybe one tip or one thing that they could pass on to their teams to help them with their resilience?
I would say, first of all, pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
People give clues all of the time when they aren't struggling, whether they mean to or not, even if they're trying to duck and cover, or even duck and cover like I was doing during my horrible marriage. If people would have paid attention, they could have said, "Hey, are you okay?" Right?
Mm-hmm.
I've noticed a change in your behavior.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on? So throw them a lifeline if you would. Pay attention to how they might be behaving, and
Mm-hmm.
provide them some support, whether it be through that relationship or through new tools, or just that lifeline, so that they know that someone cares. It's really
Mm-hmm.
important.
I like that. Thank you for saying that. I think leaders do need to pay more attention. And I've been talking a lot about just it's okay to be vulnerable right now. And maybe that's a silver lining for this year is that being vulnerable at work will be more acceptable. Because so far, crying makes you look weak. Apparently, that's not. I think crying makes you look strong. It means you're in touch with your emotions. I mean, if you're crying every day, maybe that's something different. But just to be vulnerable and let your employees know that it's okay to be vulnerable, and we're all in this together. So thank you so much for being here, and tell us where we can get a hold of you, and we'll make sure we post that link in the chat here. But where can people get a hold of you?
Well, certainly they can connect with me here on LinkedIn. My website is wlpgroup.com, and the book A Year of Resilience, which interestingly I published February of 2020, not March. It was before it all went went crazy.
Awesome.
Um,
Perfect timing.
yes, but wlpgroup.com is my website, and feel free to connect with me here on LinkedIn. I'd love to continue the conversation.
Awesome. I would say send me a carrier pigeon, just Google me, send me a fax. We're all online.
Yeah.
So thank you again. I really appreciated chatting with you. I miss you. I look forward to having a glass of wine on your boat one
Yes.
day.
Yes.
Hopefully not too distant future, maybe
Hopefully
within the
not.
next year.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank
Thank
you
you.
again. And
Thanks for
thank you all
having
for your
me.
wonderful questions.
Yes. Excellent. Thanks so much. It was fantastic.